It was a quiet evening, the kind where the city hums softly in the background, and the streets feel almost peaceful. But peace can be deceiving. For Nurse Angela Carter, the night was just beginning. She had just finished a long shift at the hospital, her scrubs still crisp despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Angela wasn't just any nurse, though. She was a combat medic, a woman who had seen the worst of humanity in war zones and had the scars, both physical and emotional, to prove it. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen on her way home. As she walked through the dimly lit parking garage, the sound of her footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. She was alone, or so she thought. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sound of heavy boots behind her. Her instincts kicked in before her mind could fully process what was happening. A group of men, their faces hidden beneath hoodies, emerged from the shadows. Their intentions were clear, and they weren't looking to ask for directions. Angela's heart raced, but she didn't panic. She couldn't afford to. These men had no idea who they were dealing with. The leader of the group stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. "Hand over your bag, and maybe we'll let you walk away," he sneered. Angela's grip tightened on her bag, not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. It held her stethoscope, her ID badge, and the remnants of a long day spent saving lives. She wasn't about to let some thugs take that from her. But more importantly, she wasn't about to let them think they could intimidate her. She had faced far worse than this. What happened next was a blur. One of the men lunged at her, and that's when everything changed. Angela's training took over. She moved with precision, her body reacting faster than her mind could think. In seconds, the man was on the ground, clutching his arm in pain. The others hesitated, clearly not expecting their victim to fight back. But Angela wasn't done. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a soldier. And soldiers don't back down. The tension in the air was palpable as the remaining gang members exchanged uneasy glances. They had underestimated her, and now they were paying the price. But Angela knew this wasn't over. These men were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. She could see it in their eyes, the flicker of fear mixed with rage. They weren't going to let her walk away that easily. And neither was she. As the standoff continued, Angela's mind raced. She knew she couldn't take them all on at once, not without a plan. But time wasn't on her side. The leader, now furious, pulled something from his pocket. The glint of metal caught the dim light, and Angela's stomach dropped. This had just gone from bad to worse. She had faced guns before, but never like this. Never alone. Never in a place where no one could hear her scream. The sound of a car engine roared in the distance, breaking the tension for just a moment. Angela's eyes darted toward the noise, hoping for a miracle. But the gang leader's voice brought her back to reality. "This is your last chance," he growled, stepping closer. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. She had two choices, fight or flight. But deep down, she knew there was only one option. She had survived war zones, saved lives under fire, and faced death more times than she could count. She wasn't about to let this be the end of her story. As the gang closed in, Angela made her move. What happened next would change everything, not just for her, but for the men who had chosen the wrong person to mess with. But that's a story for another time. Because right now, the only thing that mattered was survival. And Angela Carter wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. And this fight was far from over. Angela's breath came in short, sharp bursts. As she assessed the situation, the gang leader's eyes were locked on hers, the gun in his hand steady but his confidence wavering. He hadn't expected her to fight back, and now he was second-guessing himself. Angela could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his grip on the weapon shifted ever so slightly. He was nervous, and that made him unpredictable. But Angela had been trained for unpredictability. In the chaos of war, plans rarely survived. The first shot fired. She knew how to adapt, how to think on her feet. And right now, her mind was racing. The other men circled her like vultures, their movements hesitant but deliberate. They were waiting for their leader to make the next move, but Angela wasn't about to give them the chance. She took a step back, her eyes scanning the parking garage for anything she could use to her advantage. A loose pipe, a car alarm, anything. But the space was eerily empty. The only sound the faint hum of a flickering fluorescent light above. She was on her own, and she knew it. Her mind flashed back to her time in the military, to the days when she had patrolled war-torn streets with her unit. She remembered the weight of her gear, the sound of gunfire in the distance, the faces of the people she had saved, and the ones she couldn't. Those memories had shaped her, hardened her. They had taught her that fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. And right now, fear was the last thing on her mind. Survival was all that mattered. The gang leader took another step forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "You think you're tough, huh? You think you can take us all on?" His words were meant to intimidate, but Angela didn't flinch. She had heard worse. She had seen worse. And she knew that words were just that, words. It was actions that mattered, and she was ready to act. But before she could make her move, one of the other men spoke up. "Boss, maybe we should just take the bag and go. This ain't worth it." His voice was shaky, his eyes darting between Angela and the leader. He was scared, and Angela could use that. Fear was a powerful weapon, and she knew how to wield it. The leader, however, wasn't so easily swayed. "Shut up," he snapped, his eyes never leaving Angela. "We're not leaving until she learns her place." His words sent a chill down Angela's spine, but she didn't let it show. She couldn't. She had to stay calm, stay focused. One wrong move, and this could all go sideways. As the standoff continued, Angela's mind raced through her options. She could try to talk her way out of this, but she doubted these men were in the mood for conversation. She could fight, but even with her training, taking on 4 armed men was a risky move. Or she could run, but that would mean leaving her bag and her dignity behind. None of the options were ideal, but she had to choose. And she had to choose fast. Just as she was about to make her move, a sound broke the tension. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Angela's heart leapt with hope, but she quickly pushed it down. Hope could be dangerous. It could make you careless. And right now, she couldn't afford to be careless. The gang members heard it too. Their heads snapped toward the sound, their bodies tense. The leader's grip on the gun tightened, his eyes narrowing as he tried to figure out what was happening. Angela used the distraction to her advantage, taking a small step back and positioning herself closer to the wall. If things went south, she wanted to have something solid at her back. The footsteps grew louder, and then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath a hood. Angela's heart sank. Was this another member of the gang? Or was he just a bystander who had stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time? Either way, his presence changed everything. The gang leader turned to the newcomer, his voice sharp. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he took a step forward, his movements slow and deliberate. Angela could feel the tension in the air thickening, the stakes rising with every second that passed. She didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but one thing was clear. He wasn't afraid. The gang leader raised his gun, pointing it at the newcomer. "I said, who the hell are you?" His voice was louder now, more aggressive, but the man didn't flinch. He just kept walking, his eyes locked on the leader. Angela could see the fear creeping into the gang members' faces. They were used to being the ones in control, the ones who instilled fear in others. But this man was different. He was calm, collected, and utterly unafraid. Angela's mind raced as she tried to figure out what was happening. Was this man here to help her? Or was he just another threat she would have to deal with? She didn't know, but she couldn't afford to wait around and find out. She had to act, and she had to act now. As the gang leader's attention shifted to the newcomer, Angela saw her chance. She moved quickly, her training kicking in as she lunged toward the nearest gang member. Her movements were precise, her body moving on instinct as she disarmed him and sent him sprawling to the ground. The others turned toward her, their eyes wide with shock, but Angela didn't give them time to react. She was in control now, and she wasn't about to let go. But just as she was about to make her next move, the sound of a gunshot echoed through the parking garage. Angela froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Who had fired? Was it the gang leader? The newcomer? She didn't know, but she knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the echoes of the gunshot faded, the parking garage fell into an eerie silence. Angela's eyes darted between the gang members, the newcomer, and the leader, who was now clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. The gun had gone off, but it wasn't clear who had been hit or who had fired. The tension in the air was suffocating, the stakes higher than ever. Angela knew she had to get out of there, but she also knew she couldn't leave without answers. Who was this man who had appeared out of nowhere? Why had he intervened? And what did he want? The questions swirled in her mind, but there was no time to think. She had to ACT. As the gang members regrouped, their focus split between Angela and the newcomer. She made her decision. She wasn't going to wait around to see how this played out. She was going to take control of the situation, no matter what it took. But as she took a step forward, the newcomer spoke for the first time. His voice low and steady. "Stay back," he said, his eyes locking onto Angela's. "This isn't your fight anymore." Angela's breath caught in her throat. Who was this man? And why was he so determined to protect her? The questions burned in her mind, but there was no time to ask them. The gang leader was recovering, his eyes filled with rage as he raised his gun once more. The newcomer stepped forward, positioning himself between Angela and the gang, his body tense and ready for whatever came next. Angela knew she should run, should take this chance to escape while she still could. But something held her back. Something about this man, about the way he had stepped in without hesitation, made her want to stay. She didn't know why, but she felt like she needed to see this through, needed to know how it ended. But as the gang leader took aim, his finger tightening on the trigger, Angela realized that the end might be closer than she thought. And she wasn't ready for it. Not yet. Not like this. The sound of another gunshot rang out, and this time, Angela didn't freeze. She moved, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. But as she hit the ground, her ears ringing and her heart racing, she couldn't help but wonder, had she made the right choice? Or had she just signed her own death warrant? The answer, like so much else, was still shrouded in darkness. And as the chaos unfolded around her, Angela knew one thing for certain. This was far from over.